Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 8 of our reading of The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. Part 8. Now we can move this stuff out of the way. There we go. Anyways, in the last episode, Molly Grew had joined Smindrick and the unicorn, and they entered King Haggard's kingdom. And they were headed towards Hagsgate, which is said to be a cursed town or something. There's something evil there or something. I'm not entirely clear what's going on, but we will find out. I'm going to quickly check here. We're at 80% power. That's good. I had to redo one of my videos because I ran out of power, and then my cords wouldn't work, and it was like weird. Okay, so anyways. But yeah, this is a book by Peter Beagle, and we will get right into this. The roads of the town of Hagsgate was shaped like a footprint. Long toes splayed from a broad paw and ended in the dark claw of a digger. And indeed, where the other towns of King Haggard's realm seemed to scratch like sparrows at the mean land, Hagsgate as well was well and deeply dug in. Its streets were smoothly paved, its gardens plowed, and its proud houses might have grown up out of the earth like trees. Lights shone in every window, and the three travelers could hear voices and dogs barking and dishes being scrubbed until they squeaked. They halted by a high hedge and wondered, "Do you suppose we took a wrong turn somewhere, and this isn't Hagsgate at all?" Molly whispered. She brushed foolishly at her hopeless rags and tatters. "I knew I should have brought my good dress," she sighed. Smendrick rubbed the back of his neck wearily. "It's Hagsgate," he answered her. "It must be Hagsgate, and yet there's no smell of sorcery, no air of black magic. But why the legends? Then why the fables and fairy tales? Very confusing, especially when you've had half a turnip for dinner." The unicorn said nothing. Beyond the town, darker than dark, King Haggard's castle teetered like a lunatic on stilts, and beyond the castle the sea slid. The scent of the Red Bull moved in the night, cold among the town. "Smells of cooking and living," Smendrick said. "The good people must all be indoors, counting their blessings. I'll hail them." He stepped forward and threw back his cloak, but he had not yet opened his mouth when a hard voice said out of the air, "Save your breath, stranger, while you have it." 4 men sprang from behind the hedge. 2 of them sat their swords at Smendrick's throat, while another guarded Molly with a pair of pistols. The 4th approached Unicorn to seize her mane, but she reared up, shining fiercely, and he jumped away. "Your name," the man who had first spoken demanded of Smendrick. He was a middle-aged man, or more, as were they all, dressed in fine, dull clothing. "Gick," said the magician because of the swords. "Gick," mused the man with the pistols. "An alien name." "Naturally," the first man said. "All names are alien in Hagsgate. Well, Mr. Gick," he went on, lowering his sword slightly to the point where Smendrick's collarbone converged. If you and Mrs. Glick would kindly tell us what brings you skulking here." Smendrick found his voice and said, "I hardly know the woman," he roared. "My name is Smendrick the magician, and I'm hungry and tired and unpleasant. Put those things away, and you'll each have a scorpion by the wrong end." The 4 men looked at one another. "A magician," said the first man. "The very thing." 2 of the others nodded, and the man who had tried to capture the unicorn grumbled. "Anyone can say he's a magician these days. The old standards are gone. The old values have been abandoned. Besides, a real magician has a beard." Well, if he isn't a magician," the first man said lightly, "he'll wish he were soon enough." He sheathed the sword and bowed to Smendrick and Molly. "I am Drin," he said, "and it is possibly a pleasure to welcome you to Hagsgate." You spoke of being hungry. I believe that's easily remedied. And then perhaps you'll do us a good turn in your professional capacity. Come with me. Grown suddenly gracious and apologetic, he led them towards a lighted inn, while the 3 other men followed close behind. More townsfolk came running up now, streaming eagerly from their houses, with their own dinners half eaten and their tea left steaming, so that by the time Smindrick and Molly were seated, there were nearly 100 people wedged together on the inn's long benches, jammed into the doorways, and falling through the windows. The unicorn, unnoticed, paced slowly after. A white mare with strange eyes. The man named Dren sat at the same table with Smindrick and Molly, clattering as they ate, and filling their glasses with a furry black wine. A furry black wine. Molly drank very little. She sat quietly looking at the faces around her and noting that none seemed any younger than Dren's. And that none seemed any younger than Dren's face, though a few were much older. There was a way in which all the Hagsgate faces were very much alike, but she could not find it. And now, Dren said, when the meal was over, now you must permit me to explain why we greeted you so uncivilly. Pish, no need. Smidrick chuckled. The wine had made him chuckly and easy, and had brightened his green eyes to gold. What I want to know is the reason for the rumors that have Hagsgate full of ghouls and werewolves. Most absurd thing I've ever heard of. Dren smiled. He was a naughty man, Knotty, not N-A-U-G-H-T-Y, a naughty man, with a turtle's hard, empty jaw. It's the same thing, he said. Listen, the town of Hagsgate is under a curse. The room was suddenly very still, and in the beery light, the faces of the townspeople looked as tight and pale as cheese. Smindrick laughed again. A blessing, you mean? In the bony kingdom of old haggards, you are like another land altogether. A spring, an oasis. I agree with you that there's enchantment here, but I drink to it. Dren stopped him as he raised his glass. Not that toast, my friend. Will you drink to a woe 50 years old? It's been that long since our sorrow fell when King Haggard built his castle by the sea. When the witch built it, I think. Smidrick wagged a finger at him. Credit where it's due, after all. Ah, you know the story, Dren said. Then you must also know that Haggard refused to pay the witch when her task was completed. The magician nodded. Aye, and she cursed him for his greed. Cursed the castle, rather. But what had that to do with Hagsgate? The town has done the witch no wrong. No, Dren replied, but neither had it done her any good. She could not unmake the castle, or would not, for she fancied herself an artistic sort and boasted that her work was years ahead of its time. Anyway, she came to the elders of Hagsgate and demanded that they force Haggard to pay what was due her. Look at me and see yourself, she rasped. That's the true test of a town or of a king. A lord who cheats an ugly old witch will cheat his own folk by and by. Stop him while you can before you grow used to him. Dren sipped his wine and thoughtfully filled Smindrick's glass once more. Haggard paid her no money, he went on, and Hagsgate, alas, paid her no heed. She was treated politely and referred to the proper authorities, whereupon she flew into a fury and screamed that in our eagerness to make no enemies at all, we had made two. He paused, covering his eyes with lids so thin that Molly was sure she could see through them. Like a bird with his eyes closed, he said. It is It was then that she cursed Haggard's castle and cursed our town as well. Thus his greed brought ruin upon us all. In the sighing silence, Molly Grew's voice came down like a hammer on a horseshoe, as though she were again berating poor Captain Colley. Haggard's less at fault than you yourselves, she mocked the folk of Hagsgate, for he was only one thief, and you are many. You earned your trouble by your own avarice, not your king's. Drin opened his eyes and gave her an angry look. We earned nothing, he protested. It was our parents and grandparents whom the witch asked for help, and I'll grant you that they were as much to blame as Haggard in their way. We would have handled the matter quite differently, and every middle-aged face in the room scowled at every older face. One of the old men spoke up in a voice that wheezed and meowed. You would have done the same. You would have done just as we did. There were crops to harvest and stock to tend, as there still is. There was Haggard to live with, and there still is. We know very well how you would have behaved. You are our children. Drin glowered him down, and other men began to shout spitefully, but the magician quieted them all by asking, what was the curse? Could it have anything to do with the Red Bowl? The name rang coldly, even in the bright room, and Molly felt suddenly lonely. On an impulse, she added her own question, though it had nothing to do with the conversation. Have any of you ever seen a unicorn? It was then that she learned two things, the difference between silence and utter silence, and that she had been quite right to ask that question. The Hagsgate faces tried not to move, but they did move. Drin said carefully, We never see the bull, and we never speak of him. Nothing that concerns him can be any business of ours. As for unicorns, there are none. There never were. He poured the black wine again. I will tell you the words of the curse, he said. He folded his hands before him and began to chant. You whom Haggard holds in thrall, share his feasts and share his fall. You shall see your fortune flower till the torrent takes the tower. Yet none but one of Haggate town may bring the castle swirling down. A few others joined in as he recited the old malediction. Their voices were sad and far, and though they were not in the room at all, but their tumbling in the wind, high over the inn's chimney, helpless as dead leaves. What is it about their faces, Molly wondered. I almost know. The magician sat silently by her, rolling his wine glass in his long hands. When those words were first spoken, Drin said, Haggard had not been long in the country, and all of it was still soft and blooming, all but the town of Hagsgate. Hagsgate was then, as this land has become, a scrabbly, bare place where men put great stones on the roofs of their huts to keep them from blowing away. He grinned bitterly at the older men. Crops to harvest, stock to tend. You grew cabbages and rutabagas and a few pale potatoes, and in all of Hagsgate there was but one weary cow. Strangers thought the town accursed, having offended some vindictive witch or other. Molly felt the unicorn go by in the street, then turn and come back restless as the torches on the wall that were bowed and wriggling. She wanted to run out to her, but instead she asked quietly, and afterwards, when that had come true? Drin answered, From that moment we had known nothing but bounty. Our grim earth has grown so kind that gardens and orchards spring up by themselves. We need neither the plant nor to tend them. Our flocks multiply, our craftsmen become more clever and in their sleep, and the air we breathe and the water we drink keeps us from ever knowing illness. All sorrow parts to go around us, and all sorrow parts, as in to go around us, and this has come about while the rest of the realm, once so green, has shriveled to cinders under Haggard's hand. For 50 years, none but he and we have prospered. It is as though all others have been cursed. Share his feast and share his fall, Smendrick murmured. I see. He gulped another glass of black wine and laughed. But old King Haggard still rules, and will until the sea overflows. You don't know what a real curse is. Let me tell you my troubles. Easy tears suddenly glittered in his eyes. To begin with, my mother never liked me. She pretended, but I knew. Drin interrupted him, and just as Molly realized what was strange about the folk of Hagsgate, every one of them was well and warmly dressed. But the faces that peered out of their fine clothes were the faces of poor people, cold as ghosts and too hungry to eat, Drin said. Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swirling down. How can we delight in our good fortune when we know that it must end, and that one of us will end it? Every day makes us richer, and brings us one day nearer to our doom. Magician, for 50 years, we have lived leanly, avoiding attachments, untied all habits, readying ourselves for the sea. We have taken not a moment's joy in our wealth, or in anything else, for joy is just one more thing to lose. Pity Hagsgate, strangers, for in all the wretched world there can be no town more unhappy. Lost, the townsfolk whimpered. Misery, we. Molly Grew stared wordlessly at them, but Smendrick said respectfully, That's a good curse. That's a professional job, I always say. Whatever you're having done, go to an expert. It pays in the long run. Drin frowned and Molly nudged Smendrick. The magician blinked. Oh, well, what is it you wish of me? I must warn you that I am not a very skillful sorcerer, but I will be glad to lift this curse from you if I can. I had not taken you for any more than you are, Drin answered, but such as you are, you should do as well as any. I think we will leave the curse the way it is. If it were lifted, we might not become poor again, but we would no longer grow steadily richer, and that would be just as bad. No, our real task is to keep Haggard's tower from falling, and since the hero who will destroy it can only come from Hagsgate, this should not be impossible. For one thing, we allow no strangers to settle here. We keep them away by force if we must, but more often by guile. Those dark tales of Hagsgate that you spoke of, we invented them ourselves, and spread them as widely as we could to make certain that we would have few visitors. He smiled proudly with his hollow jaws. Smendrick propped his chin on his knuckles and regarded Drin with a sagging smile. What about your own children? He asked. How can you keep one of them from growing up to fulfill the curse? He looked around the inn, sleepily studying every wrinkled face and looked back at him. Come to think of it, he said slowly, are there no young people in the town? How early do you send children to bed in Hagsgate? No one answered him. Molly could hear blood creaking in ears and eyes and skin twitching like water plucked by the wind. Then Drin said, We have no children. We have had none since the day that the curse was laid upon us. He coughed into his fist and added, "It seemed the most obvious way of foiling the witch." Smendrick threw back his head and laughed without making a sound. Laughed to make the torches dance. Molly realized that the magician was quite drunk. Dren's mouth disappeared and his eyes hardened into cracked porcelain. "I see no humor in our plight," he said softly. "None at all." "None," Smendrick gurgled, bowing over the table and spilling his wine. "None, pardon me, none at all." Under the angry gaze of 200 eyes, he managed to recover himself and reply seriously to Dren. "Then it would seem to me that you have no worries. None that would worry you, anyways." A small whee of laughter sneaked out between his lips, like steam from a tea kettle. "So it would seem." Dren leaned forward and touched Smendrick's wrist with 2 fingers. "But I have not told you all the truth. 21 years ago, a child was born in Hagsgate. Whose child it was, we never knew. I found it myself as I was crossing the market one winter's night. It was lying on a butcher's block, not crying, although there was snow, but warm and chuckling under a comforter of stray cats. They were all purring together, and the sound was heavy with knowledge. I stood by the strange cradle for a long time, pondering while the snow fell and the cats purred prophecy." He stopped, and Molly Grew said eagerly, "You took the child home with you." "With you, of course, and raised it as your own." Dren laid his hands palm up on the table. "I chased the cats away," he said, "and went home alone." Molly's face turned the color of mist. Dren shrugged slightly. "I know the birth of a hero when I see it," he said. "Omens and portents, snakes in the nursery. Had it not been for the cats, I might have chanced the child. But they made it so obvious, so mythological. What was I to do, knowingly harboring Hagsgate's doom?" His lips twitched as though a hook was set in it. "As it happens, I erred, but it was on the side of tenderness. When I returned at sunset, the baby had vanished." Smendrick was drawing pictures with his finger in a puddle of wine, and might have heard nothing at all. Dren went on. "Naturally, no one ever admitted to leaving the child in the marketplace, and though we searched every house from cellar to dovecote, we never found it again. I might have concluded that wolves had taken the brat, or even that I had dreamed the whole encounter, cats and all, but for the fact that the very next day a herald of King Haggard's came riding into town, ordering us to rejoice. After 30 years of waiting, the king had a son at last." He looked away from the look on Molly's face. "Our foundling, incidentally, was a boy." Smendrick licked the tip of his finger and looked up. "Lit," he said thoughtfully. "Prince Lear." No, Lear. Okay. "Lear," he said thoughtfully. "Prince Lear. But there was no other way to account for his appearance." "Not likely," Dren snorted. "Any woman that would marry Haggard, even Haggard would refuse." He gave out the tale that the boy was a nephew whom he graciously adopted on the death of his parents. But Haggard has no relatives, no family. There are those who say that he was born of an overcast as Venus was born out of the sea. No one would give King Haggard a child to raise. The magician calmly held out his glass and filled it himself when Dren refused. Well, he got one somewhere, and good for him. But how could he have come by your little cat baby? Dren said. He walks in Hagsgate at night, not often, but now and then. Many of us have seen him, tall, haggard, gray as driftwood, prowling alone under an iron moon, picking up dropped coins, broken dishes, spoons, stones, handkerchiefs, rings, stepped on apples, anything, everything, no reason to it. It was Haggard who took the child, I am certain of it, and I am certain that Prince Lear is the one who will topple the tower and sink Haggard and Hagsgate together. I hope he is, Molly broke in. I hope Prince Lear is the baby you left to die, and I hope he drowns your town, and I hope the fish nibble you bare as corn cobs. Wow. Spindrift kicked her ankle as hard as he could, for the listeners were beginning to hiss like embers, and a few were rising to their feet. He asked again, "What is it you wish of me?" "You are on your way to Haggard's castle, I believe," Spindrift nodded. Yes, yes. "Ah," Dren said. "Now a clever magician could find it simple to become friendly with Prince Lear, who is reputed to be a young man of eagerness and curiosity. A clever magician might be acquainted with all manner of odd potions and powders, poppets and philters, herbs and banes, and unguents. A clever magician, mind you, I said clever, no more. A clever magician might be able to understand the proper circumstances." He let the rest drift away unspoken, but no less said. For a meal, Spindrift stood up, knocking his chair over. He leaned over the table with both hands, breathing harshly. "Is that the going rate these days? Dinner and wine? The price of poisoned prince? You'll have to do better than that, friend Dren. I wouldn't do in a chimney sweep for such a fee." Molly Grew gripped his arm, crying, "What are you saying?" The magician shook her hand away, but at the same time he lowered one eyelid in a slow wink. Dren leaned back in his chair, smiling. "I never haggle with a professional," he said. 25 pieces of gold." He haggled for half an hour, Spindrift demanding 100 gold pieces and Dren refusing to offer more than 40. At last they settled at 70, half to be paid then and half upon Spindrift's successful return. Dren counted out the money on the spot from a leather pouch at his belt. "You'll spend the night at Hagsgate, of course," he said. "I would be pleased to put you up myself." But the magician shook his head. "I think not. We will go on to the castle since we're so near it now. The sooner there, the sooner back, eh?" And he grinned craftily. He grinned a crafty and conspiratorial grin. Okay, so we are going to leave this one here. Let me see how much is left. Yeah, there's still 2 or 3 pages here. Let me find my bookmark. Oh, here it is. We are going to pick up here. Well, with Haggard's castle is always dangerous, Dren warned. But yeah, we are to page 79. So, this has been number 8. The 8th episode of our reading of The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information is in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.